Wheelchair user. What's the most patronizing thing a stranger has ever done to you? I was at the gym doing my usual upper body routine when this guy in scrubs walked straight up to my bench and grabbed my wheelchair handles without asking. "Don't worry, I've got you," he said, starting to push me away from the equipment. "Physical therapy is downstairs. You probably got confused about which floor you needed." "I'm not confused," I said, gripping the wheel rims to stop him from moving me. "I'm a member here. I was using that equipment." The guy, who had a name tag reading Dr. Marcus Webb, spinal rehabilitation, looked at me like I'd told him I was planning to fly to Mars. "Son, I've been treating spinal cord injuries for 15 years. Trust me when I say that weight training isn't appropriate for someone in your condition. You could seriously hurt yourself." He still hadn't let go of my chair, treating me like a runaway shopping cart he needed to return to the store. "My condition?" I flexed my arms, which were probably twice the size of his from years of wheelchair racing and adaptive sports. "What exactly do you think my condition is?" Dr. Webb's expression shifted to what he probably thought was compassionate concern. "Complete paralysis, obviously. Look, I understand the denial phase. I've seen it hundreds of times. But accepting your limitations is the first step toward healing." He started pushing again, and I had to grab the bench to keep from being wheeled away like a piece of furniture. "I'm not in denial about anything," I said through gritted teeth. "I know exactly what my injury is, what I can do, and what I can't do. What I can do is bench press 240. What I can't do is walk. Those are two completely different things." Dr. Webb stopped pushing but didn't release his grip on my chair. 240? That's impossible. Your muscle mass below the injury site has atrophied. Basic physiology prevents that kind of upper body development in paraplegics. His medical degree apparently hadn't covered the concept of adaptive athletics. "Want to see?" I gestured toward the loaded barbell I'd been about to attempt. "Or are you going to keep treating me like a confused patient who wandered away from the hospital?" Dr. Webb finally let go of my wheelchair, but his expression suggested he thought I was delusional. "Fine," he said, crossing his arms. "But when you injure yourself, don't say I didn't warn you." He stepped back just far enough to give me space while making it clear he was staying to witness my inevitable failure and subsequent need for his medical expertise. I positioned myself under the bar, took a deep breath, and lifted the weight cleanly off the rack. 240 went up smooth as silk, held for a beat, then came down controlled and steady. I racked the weight and looked at Dr. Webb, whose mouth was hanging open like I'd just violated several laws of physics. "Impossible," he muttered, moving closer to examine the weight plates. "Are these fake? Hollow?" He actually picked up one of the 45-pound plates and nearly dropped it when he realized it was solid iron. "They're real," I said, transferring back to my everyday chair. "Just like I'm really a competitive powerlifter who's been training here for 3 years. Just like I really know what I'm doing with my own body." Dr. Webb was still staring at the barbell like it might explain how his medical textbooks had lied to him. "But your muscle development should be impossible with your level of injury," he insisted. "Everything I know about spinal cord physiology says you shouldn't be able to achieve that kind of strength." I started packing up my gym bag, already exhausted by this conversation. "Maybe everything you know about spinal cord injuries comes from studying people in hospital beds instead of people living their lives," I suggested. "Maybe your textbooks don't cover what's possible when someone spends 10 years refusing to accept other people's limitations." Dr. Webb followed me toward the locker room, his medical curiosity apparently overriding his social awareness. "I need to understand this. What's your injury level? When did it occur? What kind of rehabilitation did you receive?" He was pulling out his phone like he wanted to document me for a research paper. "I need you to understand something," I said, stopping my chair and turning to face him directly. "I'm not your patient. I'm not your research subject. I'm a guy trying to work out in peace without being treated like a medical mystery or a miracle that needs explaining." But Dr. Webb wasn't listening. He was looking at my legs with the kind of intense focus usually reserved for lab specimens. "Have you ever experienced any return of sensation? Any phantom pain or muscle spasms that might indicate incomplete injury classification?" "I'm done with this conversation," I said, starting to wheel away. But Dr. Webb stepped in front of me, his hands reaching toward my chair handles again. "Wait, please. I think I can help you. Real help, not just acceptance of a permanent condition. What part of 'leave me alone' don't you understand?" I demanded. Several other gym members were starting to notice the commotion, and I could see the front desk staff looking in our direction with concern. Dr. Webb's voice dropped to what he probably thought was a confidential whisper. "I've been developing a new treatment protocol. Stem cell therapy combined with electrical stimulation and targeted pharmaceutical intervention. I've seen remarkable results in recent trials. Let me guess," I said. "You need test subjects for your experimental treatment, and the crippled guy at the gym looks like the perfect candidate." Dr. Webb's face reddened, but he pressed on with his sales pitch. "This isn't about experimentation. It's about hope. Don't you want to walk again? Don't you want to feel your legs, to run, to dance? I can give you that chance." His eyes were shining with the fervor of someone who'd convinced himself he was offering salvation. "I want to finish my workout without being harassed by someone who thinks my life is so tragic that it needs his intervention," I replied. "I want to be treated like a person instead of a problem that needs solving." Dr. Webb pulled out a business card and tried to hand it to me. "Just think about it. What do you have to lose? A few months of treatment could give you back everything you've lost. I didn't take the card, so he placed it on my lap without permission. I haven't lost anything, I said, flicking his card onto the floor. I've gained things. I've gained perspective, strength, determination, and the ability to spot people who see me as a charity case from across a crowded room. Dr. Webb bent to retrieve his card, his face flushing with embarrassment. I'm trying to help you, he said, straightening up. I'm offering you a chance to reclaim your life, to become whole again. The word whole hit me like a slap, carrying all the assumptions about my worth and completeness that I'd been fighting for years. I am whole, I said quietly. I'm complete exactly as I am. What's broken here isn't my body. It's your understanding of what makes life valuable. Dr. Webb shook his head like I was a particularly stubborn patient refusing medication. You're in denial, he insisted. It's a common psychological defense mechanism. But denial won't change your medical reality. You're paralyzed. That's not something to celebrate or accept. That's something to fix. I looked around the gym at the other members going about their workouts, none of them being questioned about their medical history or offered unsolicited treatments for their perceived deficiencies. You know what's really broken? A world where a doctor thinks he has the right to diagnose and treat someone without being asked. I have an obligation to help when I see suffering, Dr. Webb replied. The Hippocratic Oath doesn't allow me to ignore someone who needs medical intervention. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. Who's suffering? I was having a great workout until you decided I was miserable and needed saving. The only suffering happening here is the discomfort you feel watching someone live differently than you think they should. Dr. Webb tried one more approach, his voice taking on the patronizing tone usually reserved for children and psychiatric patients. I understand that accepting help can be difficult, especially for someone who's worked so hard to maintain independence. But sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you need assistance. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is tell a condescending doctor to mind his own business and let you finish your set in peace, I replied, starting to wheel toward the exit. Consider this your professional development for the day. But Dr. Webb wasn't finished with me. Over the next week, he showed up at the gym every day I was there, always with new arguments about why I should consider his treatment. He brought research papers, testimonials from other patients, and detailed explanations of his innovative techniques. I've been thinking about your case, he said on Monday, approaching me during my warm-up. Your upper body development suggests your injury might be less complete than originally diagnosed. With the right intervention, we could potentially restore significant function. My case? I repeated. I'm not your case. I'm not your patient. I'm a guy who wants to work out without being treated like a medical curiosity. But Dr. Webb had clearly spent the weekend researching and was ready with a new strategy. I've reviewed the latest literature on incomplete spinal cord injuries. There are documented cases of functional improvement years after the initial trauma. You could be an ideal candidate for revolutionary treatment. By Wednesday, he'd brought printed materials about his research program. I've spoken with my colleagues about your situation. We're prepared to offer you a spot in our clinical trial at no cost. Full medical coverage, rehabilitation support, even compensation for your time. Why are you so invested in changing me? I asked finally. What is it about my life that bothers you so much that you can't leave me alone? Dr. Webb looked genuinely surprised by the question. I'm not bothered by your life. I'm bothered by the waste of potential. You're clearly intelligent, motivated, physically capable. Imagine what you could accomplish if you weren't limited by paralysis. He gestured at my body like it was a machine with broken parts. I'm not limited by paralysis, I said. I'm limited by people who think paralysis defines me. I hold 3 state records in wheelchair racing. I have a master's degree in engineering. I run a successful consulting business. What exactly am I not accomplishing? Dr. Webb waved his hand dismissively. Those are admirable adaptations, but they're still adaptations to disability. Wouldn't you rather pursue activities without the need for special accommodations or modified equipment? You mean like sitting in a regular chair instead of a wheelchair? I asked. Like driving a regular car instead of one with hand controls? Like living in a world designed for walking people instead of demanding that the world be accessible to everyone? Well, yes, Dr. Webb said, missing the point entirely. Wouldn't that be preferable to constantly fighting for accommodations and acceptance? I stared at him, realizing he genuinely believed that conformity was better than advocacy. What would be preferable is living in a world where doctors don't assume disabled people are desperate to be cured of their disabilities, where medical professionals understand that different isn't deficient. Friday brought Dr. Webb's most aggressive approach yet. He arrived at the gym with another man in a lab coat, someone he introduced as Dr. Patricia Stevens, a neurologist specializing in spinal cord regeneration. They'd clearly coordinated this intervention. We've been discussing your case, Dr. Stevens said without preamble. Your resistance to treatment suggests possible psychological factors that might be interfering with your recovery process. Have you considered that depression or post-traumatic stress might be affecting your judgment? The implication hit me like a physical blow. Not only was I being pathologized for my disability, but now my mental health was being questioned because I refused unwanted medical attention. Are you seriously suggesting that I'm mentally ill because I don't want your treatment? Not mentally ill, Dr. Stevens clarified, but possibly experiencing psychological barriers to healing. It's not uncommon for long-term disabled patients to develop identity attachments to their condition. Treatment might feel threatening because it challenges your sense of self. I looked back and forth between the two doctors, both of them studying me with the clinical detachment usually reserved for laboratory animals. My sense of self isn't threatened by your treatment. My sense of self is threatened by your assumption that I need to be fixed. Everyone needs medical intervention sometimes, Dr. Webb interjected. That's part of being human. The question is whether you're going to let pride prevent you from accessing potentially life-changing care. And the question I have, I replied, is whether you're going to let your savior complex prevent you from respecting another person's autonomy and right to refuse medical care. Dr. Stevens pulled out a tablet and began taking notes. This defensive response pattern is exactly what I was referring to. The psychological investment in disability identity can be quite strong, especially in cases where the patient has achieved some measure of adaptation. Patient? I repeated. I'm not your patient. I haven't asked for your medical opinion or your psychological evaluation. I'm a gym member trying to exercise in peace. But Dr. Stevens was already deep into her assessment. The aggression and paranoia are classic indicators of someone whose disability has become so central to their identity that they can't imagine life without it. Treatment isn't just about physical healing, it's about psychological liberation from the disabled mindset. I felt a cold rage settling in my chest, the kind that comes when someone reduces your entire existence to a psychiatric diagnosis. The disabled mindset? Is that what you call refusing to be treated like a broken toy that needs fixing? It's what we call the psychological adaptation that prevents disabled individuals from seeking appropriate medical intervention, Dr. Stevens replied, still taking notes. The mind creates defense mechanisms to protect against the trauma of hope and potential disappointment. My mind created defense mechanisms to protect against doctors who think they own my body and have the right to experiment on it, I shot back. My trauma isn't from being disabled. My trauma is from people like you who refuse to accept that I might know what's best for my own life. Dr. Webb tried to play peacemaker. Nobody's trying to experiment on you. We're offering proven medical treatment that could restore function you've lost. Why would you choose to remain disabled when you could choose to be healed? Because I'm not choosing to remain disabled, I explained for what felt like the 100th time. I'm choosing to remain myself. My disability isn't something I'm wearing like a costume that I can take off when it becomes inconvenient. But if you could take it off, Dr. Stevens pressed, wouldn't you want to? Wouldn't anyone want to walk instead of using a wheelchair, to have full sensation instead of paralysis? Would you want to be taller if you could? Would you want different colored eyes? Would you want to completely change your personality if there was a pill for that? I countered. At what point does medical intervention become medical coercion? The two doctors exchanged glances, clearly communicating something I wasn't privy to. Dr. Webb spoke first. We're not trying to coerce anyone. We're trying to offer hope to someone who seems to have given up on the possibility of improvement. I haven't given up on anything, I said, my voice rising loud enough that other gym members were openly staring now. I've given up on the idea that I need to be different than I am to be valuable. I've given up on the idea that walking is inherently better than rolling. Dr. Stevens made another note on her tablet. The rationalization is quite sophisticated. It's common for long-term disabled patients to develop complex philosophical justifications for avoiding treatment that might disrupt their established coping mechanisms. And it's common for medical professionals to pathologize any response that doesn't fit their narrow understanding of what disabled people should want, I replied. Not every refusal of treatment is a psychological defense. Sometimes it's just good judgment. Dr. Webb pulled out his business card again, along with several brochures about his research program. I'm going to leave these with you. When you're ready to move beyond acceptance to actual healing, we'll be here to help. Don't let pride rob you of the chance to reclaim your full humanity. My full humanity? The phrase stopped me cold. Are you suggesting that I'm currently operating at partial humanity? That people in wheelchairs are somehow less human than people who walk? Of course not. Dr. Webb backtracked quickly. I meant your full physical potential, your complete range of capabilities. But the damage was done, and he knew it. My complete range of capabilities includes the ability to recognize medical manipulation disguised as compassion, I said, sweeping his brochures off my lap onto the floor, and the capability to tell the difference between doctors who heal and doctors who need to be needed. Dr. Stevens closed her tablet with a sharp snap. We've done what we can. The psychological barriers are clearly too entrenched for rational discussion. Perhaps when the depression and denial phase passes, he'll be more receptive to intervention. They walked away together, their voices carrying back as they discussed my case and the challenges of treating patients who had developed pathological attachments to their disabilities. I sat there in my wheelchair, surrounded by scattered medical brochures and the stares of other gym members, feeling like I'd just survived an assault disguised as a consultation. The gym manager, Lisa, approached cautiously. She'd been watching the interaction from behind the front desk and looked concerned. Are you okay? Those guys seemed pretty intense. They were doctors who decided I needed saving from myself, I explained, gathering the scattered brochures to throw away. Apparently my refusal to want their experimental treatment makes me mentally ill. Lisa shook her head. That's messed up. Want me to ban them from approaching you in here? I can make it clear they need to leave you alone. Her offer was tempting, but I knew it wouldn't solve the larger problem. They'll just find other ways to contact me, I said. Guys like that don't give up easily once they've decided someone needs their help. I was right. Over the next month, Dr. Webb and Dr. Stevens launched a campaign that felt more like stalking than medical outreach. They sent emails with subject lines like, "Don't give up on walking," and "New hope for spinal cord patients." They left voicemails describing breakthrough treatments and limited-time opportunities to join clinical trials. They even contacted my primary care physician to suggest that I might benefit from psychiatric evaluation. The breaking point came when they showed up at my office. I was in the middle of a client meeting when my assistant buzzed to say 2 doctors were in the lobby asking to speak with me about a medical emergency. Thinking something might be wrong with my family, I excused myself and went to meet them. "There's no medical emergency," Dr. Webb announced when I reached the lobby. "But there is a medical opportunity that won't wait much longer. Our clinical trial is accepting final participants, and I've held a spot for you." "You lied to get into my workplace," I said, aware that my client was probably wondering why I'd left our meeting. "You told my assistant there was an emergency." Dr. Stevens stepped forward with what she probably thought was a reassuring smile. "Your condition is an emergency, even if it's not acute. Every day you delay treatment is another day of lost neural plasticity. The window for optimal intervention is closing." She pulled out yet another brochure, this one featuring before and after photos of smiling former wheelchair users. "The window for optimal intervention in your behavior closed about 2 months ago," I replied. "This is harassment, and if you don't leave immediately, I'm calling security." But Dr. Webb had prepared for this resistance. "I've spoken with your family," he announced, pulling out his phone to show me a text conversation. "Your sister Jennifer is very concerned about your refusal to consider treatment. She's asked us to stage an intervention." My blood ran cold as I read messages from my sister expressing worry about my stubbornness and asking the doctors to help convince me to give treatment a chance. Jennifer had always been supportive of my independence, but Dr. Webb had clearly found a way to manipulate her protective instincts. "You contacted my family without my permission?" I demanded. "That's a violation of medical privacy laws." Dr. Stevens shook her head like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "We didn't share any medical information. We simply reached out to people who love you and want what's best for you. Your family is naturally concerned about your refusal to consider potentially life-changing treatment." "My family was naturally concerned until you told them they should be," I corrected. "Jennifer has never questioned my medical decisions before." "What exactly did you tell her?" Dr. Webb's smile was smug and self-satisfied. "We explained that depression and denial often prevent disabled patients from recognizing treatment opportunities. She was shocked to learn that you'd been refusing care that could restore your mobility. Because you presented it that way," I said, my voice rising. "You framed my autonomous medical decision as mental illness and convinced my sister that I needed intervention." Other people in the lobby were starting to stare, but I no longer cared about making a scene. "We presented the medical facts," Dr. Stevens insisted. "Spinal cord injury, refusal of treatment, possible psychological barriers to recovery. Your family drew their own conclusions about what those facts meant. You manipulated my family into pressuring me by pathologizing my refusal to be your test subject," I accused. "You turned my medical privacy into a weapon against me." Dr. Webb pulled out a folder thick with papers and consent forms. "We've simply made it possible for your loved ones to participate in your healing journey. Jennifer and your parents have all agreed to support whatever intervention might be necessary to overcome your resistance to treatment." The phrase, "whatever intervention might be necessary," sent alarm bells through my head. This had moved beyond medical advocacy into something that felt dangerously close to medical coercion, backed by family pressure. "Get out," I said quietly. "Get out of my office, stop contacting my family, and stop pretending that your obsession with changing me is medical necessity." But Dr. Webb wasn't finished delivering his message. "Your family is meeting with us tonight at 7 to discuss next steps. We'd prefer to have your voluntary cooperation, but we're prepared to pursue other options if necessary." The threat was clear and terrifying. "Other options like what?" I demanded. Dr. Stevens consulted her tablet before answering. "Psychiatric evaluation to determine competency for medical decision-making. Family intervention to assess whether you're capable of independent living. Possible guardianship proceedings if your judgment is deemed impaired by depression or psychological denial." The words hit me like physical blows. They were threatening to have me declared mentally incompetent because I refused their treatment, using my own family as allies in stripping away my autonomy and independence. "You can't do that," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "I'm competent. I run a business. I live independently. I make my own decisions." Dr. Webb's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Of course you're competent in most areas of your life, but trauma-related psychological barriers can create blind spots in medical decision-making. Sometimes the people who love us have to make difficult choices on our behalf." I felt trapped in a nightmare where my refusal to want their experimental treatment had been twisted into evidence of mental illness. My family, who I'd counted on for support, had been turned against me by doctors who couldn't accept that I might know what was best for my own body. "This is insane," I said, looking back and forth between them. "You're talking about having me declared incompetent because I won't volunteer for your research study. That's not medicine. That's kidnapping with a medical degree." Dr. Stevens made another note on her tablet. "The paranoid ideation and persecution complex are concerning. This level of defensive response suggests the psychological investment in disability identity is even stronger than we initially assessed. My persecution complex? I laughed bitterly. You just threatened to have me declared mentally incompetent and take away my independence. That's not paranoid ideation, that's rational fear based on your actual stated intentions. We're trying to help you, Dr. Webb insisted one more time. Everything we're doing is motivated by genuine concern for your well-being and your potential for recovery. Don't let pride destroy your chance for healing. I looked at these two doctors, supposedly dedicated to healing, who were willing to destroy my life and independence because I wouldn't submit to their experimental treatment. The most patronizing thing they'd done wasn't assuming I was broken. It was assuming they owned the right to fix me whether I wanted it or not. The only thing that needs healing here is a medical system that thinks patient consent is optional when doctors know better, I said, turning toward the elevator. And if you try to manipulate my family into forcing treatment on me, you'll find out exactly how capable and competent I really am. 6 months later, after restraining orders, medical board complaints, and a lawsuit that exposed their pattern of targeting disabled individuals for unauthorized research, both doctors lost their licenses to practice medicine. My family, once they understood how they'd been manipulated, became fierce advocates for my autonomy and disability rights in general. The most patronizing thing a stranger ever did to me was assume I needed saving, but their failure to save me taught me that sometimes the most healing thing you can do is refuse to be healed.